Olá, seja bem-vindo ao Macro e Pauta Internacional. Eu sou Rafael Balago, repórter de Mundo do Exame, e no programa de hoje conversamos com Mollick, um pesquisador renomado de inteligência artificial. Mollick é autor do livro Co-Inteligência, que será lançado em junho no Brasil, e também é professor da Faculdade Wharton. Na obra, ele detalha como a IA já está mudando o mundo na educação, no trabalho e no empreendedorismo, e traça cenários de como será o futuro da tecnologia. Assista a entrevista a seguir.
Professor, I read your book in the weekend, last weekend. It's a really good book. It's so fluent, like it catch me, and I read huge chunks just for in one time. And my first question for you is, how do you can if you are a worker, how you can discover if your job is at risk? It can like be extinct for AI, or it can survive. And I ask this because, if, like for example, you're a student, you're looking for a career. How can you see the signs of the future of the career you choose?
That's a really good question. The answer is generally we don't know, but we do have some sense of the jobs that are most overlapping with AI. Overlap doesn't mean replaced. We don't know, right? Like right now, the current state of AI is not replacing a lot of jobs, but it is transforming them. And generally, the more educated and more education your job requires, the more your job pays, and the more creativity your job requires, the more it overlaps with AI. So there is a list of jobs that overlap with AI that economists have come up with. I discussed that in the book. I think about this a lot because of those jobs, there's 1,016 jobs on the list. Business school professor is 22. So I think a lot about this, and I already see my job transforming, right? So I know that the AI does a better job grading than me because we have research that shows this. One of the things I do as my job is grading papers. I don't use it to grade yet because my students would get mad, but it does better than me. But that doesn't mean that my job disappears, right? It changes. As if AI helps me write research, then I spend more time doing other things. So jobs will change more than they'll disappear, at least with the current state of AI. And so it's not so much that any one job will vanish. On the other hand, if AI keeps getting better, then at some point it starts to actually do jobs, but we're not there yet.
Mhm. I read that it's going to create new jobs that we don't imagine yet, right?
Well, we also don't know that, right? As of right now, it has not created a lot of new jobs we can't imagine, right? Prompt engineer, some of this is not really a job yet. And so in every historical technological wave, new technologies have gotten rid of some jobs and created new ones. Economists guess that that's what's going to happen this time, but we have no evidence yet. So it's possible this time looks different than other times, and it doesn't create more jobs. It's possible that it transforms all of our work. We just don't fully know yet.
Mhm. In the book, you mentioned that the AI helps people with low grades in school to get better and like leveling the field between good students and bad students. And do you think this can lead to less inequality in incomes in the future, like with people getting more access to knowledge? Maybe they get more money and have a better society.
That is one one of the biggest questions everyone is trying to study with AI now. So as you mentioned, there's a lot of research that now shows that low performers get a large boost from AI from using AI. The AI helps them perform at a higher skill level. The real question is, do higher skill performers also get a big boost or not? There's a little bit of evidence that that happens, but less of it so far. So the question of inequality is really, does everyone get boosted up some degree, or is it only the low performers that get a boost? Or, do high performers get an even larger boost once they learn how to use it? And that's going to determine the fate of inequality. Right now, we know low performers are getting a boost. There's a little evidence that high performers also get a boost, but we don't know yet. And that's going to determine a lot about what this means for us.
Mhm. And I also want to this question about countries, because countries like Brazil has some difficulties to have less access to technology. And with AI, you have a lot of access to more knowledge and technology. Do you think this will help countries like Brazil to get better development, or it can improve the gap between countries because the US and the developed countries will advance even more?
Well, I actually think that is one of the most exciting things about AI from a sort of global perspective is it does close these gaps. You have access to everybody in Brazil has essentially access to the exact same tools as everybody anywhere else, right? When I talk to, a big US bank, or if I talk to a technology company, the point I try and make to them is they have access to the exact same tools as every kid everywhere in the world does. There's no better AI that you could buy than you can get now for free through Google's, Gemini 2.5 or OpenAI's O3 are available for free. And that is this exact same tool that you'll find in any of the most advanced companies in the world, because they don't have a more advanced version. In fact, I would argue that in Brazil, you probably have better access than people do at many of, like at Goldman Sachs or many of the big US banks, because they ban AI use. So so I do think this is a big chance to close gaps. These things are also incredibly good at translation. And not just language translation, right? Where we could dub this in Portuguese or whatever, but also in even translation of frames. Help me explain this in a way that would make sense. Help me explain my Brazilian offerings in a way that would make sense to someone in Mexico or in the U.S. or in Saudi Arabia. Like, it's very good at those kind of translations too. And so I think that there's a huge opportunity for to close gaps between countries.
About the future of the
Yeah.
AI,
Yeah.
you see a future when a lot of different companies has the technology, or a future more concentrated, or few companies in few countries concentrate the services such we have in the social networks, for example?
I think you're asking exactly. I mean, every question you're asking is pretty much the kind of key ones that a lot of the future rides on, and we don't know. So right now, there's two kinds of AI products out there. There's what we call open weights models and proprietary closed weight models. The closed weight
Mhm.
models are like ChatGPT, Google's Gemini, Anthropic's Claude. Those are ones where it's controlled by one company, and there's a few companies competing in that space. Then there are open weights models. Meta's Llama and DeepSeek are two examples. Anyone can download and use those models or modify them. The open weights models are a little bit behind the closed weight models right now. So the closed weight models are a little bit better, but there is a lot of competition in that space. So we don't know how this shapes out. Right now, because there's open up model opportunities, there's now free models that you can run if you want to in any country around the world. But we don't know how that's going to work out yet, right? If the open models stay better forever, or if the gap closes.
Mhm. I see. And talking about now about entrepreneurship and your job at Wharton, um, AI is like lowering the cost of innovation. It's easier to prototype, to testing, to create marketing strategies. But how is to compete in this environment when everyone has access to this creativity, and creativity maybe is not so much is uh is an important thing as was before.
So I think it's interesting. AI is creative. It's not as creative as the most creative person, right? So whatever, if creative people are still creative, right? It's not coming up with better ideas than them, at least not yet, right? Everything we're talking about could change in the future. So that's the first thing, right? The second is that, action, doing things is still a barrier, right? The AI can't execute fully in the world. Entrepreneurs who do the work and finish things up and push through, like, do better than those who don't, right? So there's still a big opportunity for acting, for turning ideas into action. One of my colleagues at Wharton has a study showing that AI is good at idea generation for entrepreneurs, and he calls it, ideas are a dime a dozen, which is a English expression that basically says ideas are easy, right? Execution is hard, and so I think that hasn't changed. The thing about entrepreneurship is entrepreneurship is really about being very like being better than everyone else at one thing, and then trying not to fail because of everything else, right? Like, you're really good at sales, you have a good idea for a product, you're a great chef, and then you're usually not good at everything else, right? Like, you're great at a chef, but you're not good at accounting, right? You're a great journalist, but you don't know how to write a marketing plan. So one of the great things about AI is it's pretty good at all the other stuff you're bad at. So a good entrepreneur focuses on things they're good at. If they're really good at innovation, then that becomes their advantage. So I think it doesn't remove that and can enhance it.
That's a good point. And we have some evidence or numbers about ideas generated for AI to new business that went to the market and were tried in the real world.
So a lot of that evidence is very early days, right?
Mm.
We have a few studies that show things in theory, right? And things that are working their way through companies. So I talk about I think in the book, this paper by my colleagues that shows that they had their entrepreneurship students generate 200 ideas. They had the AI generate 200 startup ideas. They had outside judges judge them by willingness to pay. Of the top 40 ideas, 35 came from the AI, only 5 from the humans in the room, as judged by other people. So some of those ideas got launched. We're still early on those, right? We know that we just completed a study at Procter and Gamble, which is a very large consumer goods company, and they found higher innovativeness from people using AI. So we're in the early days. I can't point to like 6 products that are AI only products at this point, and it still needs to be combined with human work at this stage to make success happen. So I think we're not all the way there yet, but I think it's more of a companion, a co-intelligence for idea generation than it is something that I would just use.
Mhm. And we also say in the book that AI will be good to students. Can be like a person tutor to help the student in the steps and the tests and everything. But at the same time, we have a movement, especially here in Brazil, to try to remove cell phones from the smartphones from the classroom in the schools, and to reduce the use of the cell phones during the classrooms and class time. And how do you see these two things? Like, if a school sometimes prohibit some cell phones in the school, could it be some harmful to the students to uh, put them away from the AI?
Well, actually, I think the evidence is growing that AI can very much help learning, but it has to be guided by teachers. Like, I don't think students should be using AI in a classroom without teacher guidance. Because what happens is we have a study that shows that if you just use AI as a student, you tend to ask for just answers. And then and then you think you learned, but you didn't. You just write down the answer. However, there's now increasing numbers of studies that show if teachers help build help create the right prompts for the chatbot. If it's used, as part of a classroom setting, you get very large boosts to learning. So I don't think that these two are incompatible. I don't think we want students pulling out their phone and getting the answer to a math problem that's on the board. I think we need to think carefully about how outside of class a student might use the AI to connect to what they do. Inside of class, a teacher might guide them in how to use AI to help them learn something. So I actually don't think there's any incompatibility, right? I think it can, just like any other electronic form, it can be distracting. If you look at the history of education with calculators, for example, when calculators first came out in the 1970s, um, math classes didn't know what to do and they were banned. And then we figured out how to teach math with calculators. So sometimes you have to learn how to do math by hand, and then you start to learn to use a calculator to do more advanced math. I think the same thing has to happen with AI. So I think just telling students use AI not a great way for them to learn.
It's a good comparison in your book, the thesis of calculators, something that I hadn't imagined before. And also in the book, you mentioned the risk that AI can be used to create bad things, such as chemical weapons and some tactics for criminals. And how governments and companies can act to try to prevent this use? And how do you see the real action in this area?
Great question again. So there are a lot of risks from AI. One of the risks people think about a lot is what if this helps somebody? Like, one of the big advantages of the world is that most criminals are not very good, right? Like, they're not that smart, they're not that competent, they're criminals because they're and so um, if you try and try and create a biological weapon, most criminals couldn't do that. So the thought is, what if AI would help you do this kind of thing, right? What if it helps you? And there's actually tests now of like how good is it at helping a team of smart people who don't know how to do otherwise to create a virus or some other kind of concern, right? And so I think that we don't have we don't right now the models aren't good enough. We're actually testing that. But I think it is a concern people have, right? What if it enables bad things? People will argue on both sides of this. Some people will say, look, the internet also lets you look up how to make a bomb, and that doesn't matter very much. But so we don't know the impact. The bigger question that you ask is, what about government response? I would say since I wrote the book, governments have backed away from regulating AI even more than they did before. Partially that's because of the new U.S. administration. Partially that's because of a technology race. So DeepSeek, which is a Chinese model that came out in January, was the first time a Chinese large language model was sort of on the frontier of open models. It was as good as other American open models. It was not necessarily better. It was not better than the closed models, but it was a big jump forward for China. And this turned into a whole story about international competition. So now, both in Europe, the US, or in Europe, the US, and in China, we're seeing less regulation, not more. So I don't see a lot of move towards restricting AI right now, for better or for worse.
Mhm. And other worried point is that AI can be used to create other AIs, especially to create robots, as you mentioned in the book. And how do you see this movement of the use of the AI in the real world to try to create robots that can act to make works and do things in person in some way?
So in the book, I focus on one form of what used to be called AI, generative AI, large language models mostly, right? There are other forms of machine learning, artificial intelligence, that have been used for robots for a long time. Until fairly recently, including after the book, we didn't know whether large language models would be helpful in making robots perform better. Now the answer seems to be yes. Like, so there's a lot of things that made robotics very hard that large language models seem to make easier. I think people are still a little overambitious at how quickly humanoid robots are going to be here and useful. I think there's a lot more things to work out, but it does seem to have created a burst of robotic innovation that we haven't seen, before.
Mhm. And one of my last questions is about the effects on the information market, such as journalism and content. You mentioned in the book that's a possibility that AI can be used to check if the information is correct, but AI is not good at it. And how do you see this future of the content and the news in the following years?
So I think I actually if I point out one thing that I thought that I would think I was wrong about two things in the book, or only I mean there's probably other things, but one is I think AI got adopted even faster than I was expecting, right? We're at nearly 1 billion users. That I was not expecting so quickly, right? Great for somebody writing a book about it, but when I wrote it, it was not that many users. Usually it's much slower. And then I think the second thing is I thought that the information impacts of AI would happen sooner, like this US election season online, because it's very easy to fake anyone's voice or audio recording or anything else. Just it turns out though that the information environment online is so bad already that no one trusts anything. So one of the more interesting phenomenon to kind of rise up in the short term has been on Elon Musk's platform X. Anyone can ask his AI to weigh in on whether something's true or not, and it's pretty neutral. Like it's not 100%. There's been some scandals where somebody at OpenAI has made the AI talk about things in ways that it didn't want to, and it just complains, I'm being told that I should answer this question this way, but I don't believe it. So I think there's an interesting kind of fight going on between AI as fact checker and AI as disinformation that we don't know the resolution of yet.
Mhm. And I think my last question is, what is the best idea that AI gave to you?
Oh, it's funny. I use it for like I get little ideas all the time, right? My son's about to have a birthday. Here's everything about him. Find me a gift I hadn't thought of before. I think when I'm coming up with when I write something, I always write it myself, and then I have the AI read it through and give me suggestions on how to make it better, right? And sometimes those are really great suggestions to take things further. I have I've generated ideas for, and innovation stuff that I've picked up and run on. So in the book, I talk about being a cyborg, working with AI all the time. I couldn't tell you which ideas are AI ideas and which are mine because I kind of work with it in a way that blends the credit.
It's a good metaphor about the Ciborgue and Centauro, right? I-
Exactly. So the sort of Centaur model, I would divide the work up where there's some AI work. AI does the innovation, I do the writing. And then I'd be able to tell you what the AI did. In a cyborg model, you blend your work together, right? So I go to AI hundreds of times a day for little things and for big things. I couldn't tell you what's AI work and what isn't because it's blended with my work.
Mhm. Great. So, Professor, these are my questions. Is any other point, things important to mention that I didn't ask you?
The other thing I would say is the thing that's turned out to be most important in the book, in terms of helping people out, and this is retrospectively, right, talking to people after the fact, has been the advice to just use this. If you have not used this for 10 hours, if you haven't had the crisis I talked about in the book of like, what does this mean? Why is this so good? Then I think that's your main assignment I'd give you, right? Is you just have to use this enough. And that is the only really big barrier standing in the way, is a lot of people just don't use it. It's free, but you want to try and use the best models you can, and I think you'll find some interesting things as a result.
For sure. Professor, thank you very
Okay.
much for your time today for this interview.
Amazing, thank you, and and I'm
Okay.
excited about your readers getting a chance to hear about it.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Professor.